It's recording.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Josh.
Welcome, everybody. We'll call the meeting to order at 6:02. This is a meeting of the Village of Holly Finance Committee, along with our guests from Holly Township. Ms. Baker, could we have a roll call, please?
Brandon.
Here.
Kyer.
Here.
Delaney.
Here. Are present. First item is the selection of chairperson. This is actually the first meeting of Finance Committee in this session. It's the pleasure of the committee.
The chairperson of our finance committee. Is that a motion? That is a motion. I will second the motion.
Motion is we'll call vote. Is in order on that?
Kyer.
Yes.
Brandon.
Yes.
Delaney.
Yes. Motion carries. Thank you very much, ladies. New business. Discuss the contract offered by the township for relocation of village offices to the 4092 Grange Hall Road property. Mr. Walker, do you want to give us an introduction?
So this meeting tonight is pursuant to council action at the last village council meeting where they authorized the finance committee along with myself to meet with representatives from the township to talk about a proposed contract to move into that location. As you spoke, in your packet that you have first a list of talking points that we delivered to both the committee and to the township, just so that everybody would have something ahead of time. By no means is this list of talking points all-inclusive of what could be added, and some of the talking points that are listed may not even be addressed. That's really up to you folks as you negotiate. The second item in there is a list of questions. It's 2 pages. You have seen these before. They were provided to the council as a whole at a previous council meeting. Those were questions that staff had for the township and Mr. Cullis. Mr. Cullis did answer those. We returned those to you. And so really, that's the depth of what you had. There's a pretty short time frame in which this group of people, Finance Committee and Township, has in order to reach the objective of council in having an agreement in place by October the 2nd. And so that's what we have tonight. So I'm not sure if you want to have Mr. Cullis start, if that's where all you want to start, or how you want to proceed.
Yeah, I think certainly, Mr. Cullis, if you wanted to give some opening comments, that would, I think, be very appropriate.
Okay, so I see on your new business, it says, discuss the contract offered by the township. The motion, as I remember, was for the finance committee to meet with the township and negotiate a contract. The questions or the talking points, as Mr. Walker said, on the bottom of the page, it said, this is only a list of talking points for the township contract to begin negotiations. So we didn't come with a contract put together because we need to find out what those issues are within the contract. I do want to make one point that this is we've got a little bit of the cart in front of the horse, because if you remember back in June, I had invited the village to sit down and discuss the opportunities for the property, the opportunities of shared services. Typically, when you have a contract, whether it be a lease contract or, as in your questions, the discussion about condominium, you would be creating that lease on a specific use or a specific space. We've never had those conversations about which space you would use, how would you want to use the facility, how would we look at it going forward. Yes, we did, as Ms. Brandon said, I talked about different elements, whether it was the parks, whether it was the police or DPW, which, by the way, police, DPW are all part of the village. Parks is a separate entity. In those conversations, those again were opportunities of how the township could use this property. It's property that's paid for by the taxpayers, it's owned by the township of Holly. That being said, going forward, I think from these negotiations, we can come up with a lease agreement that everybody would be comfortable with, albeit some numbers would have to be plugged in at some point in time, and some specific language, once it's determined what space is being used and what costs are involved. One of the examples that I would make reference to was in the questions that were supplied, number 8 says the village control the heat, air in our areas of the building. Then further down it says, the village will be responsible for repairs for their own building space.
Can you say which number that is, please? Oh, 13.
Number 8 and 13. So those are things that have yet to be determined as to what they were. There were several concept drawings that were talked about in my original presentation, because again, as I had said in that original presentation, there's 7.6 acres there. There's plenty of room for all of municipal services to share that space, to create, I've seen the word complex, we've used the word park, municipal complex, municipal park, to go in. Those conversations have never been had, so there are some specifics that aren't available for the purpose of a literal lease. And it would have to be determined once it was decided space. The several drawings that were brought, if you remember, one of them showed just the use of the building as it was. Another one showed if we added on this way. I think another one showed examples of maybe a DPW police or another building. So there were some different concepts. That's part of discussing the opportunities and what everybody sees as an actual goal for the community. I did want to share this with you because it's been out there a lot that Mr. Cullis wants to do this, he said he's going to do that. They were concepts. What does conceptual design mean? This is taken from Wikipedia. Conceptual designs are scalable drawings that define the basic parameters of the project. They are usually void of detail, dimensions, and technical notes, so you can review and modify the design with ease. These designs in preliminary stages of development, they are intended to explore ideas. And we've kind of skipped that step when we ended up here. That being said, again, I still think we can find our way to a lease agreement that would be suitable to everyone. Void maybe the technical terms or numbers depending on what space is eventually decided upon.
Although if I can interrupt just before you get too much farther though, is you and I, we have had discussions about direct office space that the village was used. So I don't want there to be the statement out there that there's been no discussions. There's been no discussions with this committee, this group. We've had some pretty specific discussions about office space.
Well, we've had discussions, yes, but
Okay.
as your questions point out, in here, in some of them, as you go through them, it talks about if it's shared space, if it's there. So there are details that have not been worked out.
For sure.
And there are costs that have not been worked out. And all I'm saying is typically when a lease is put together, we have a finite space in mind. And so I just wanted the group to understand that we're entering this a little bit backwards, but it doesn't mean we can't come to something. Now, the 21 questions that were posed on this first page, if you compare those to the 13 that the village posed the last time, there's some overlap. They're not verbatim, but they're very similar. What I did, and I can pass this out, is we looked at the 21 questions and we've divided them between those that we felt needed discussion and those that we are pretty much in agreement on, with the exception of 2 decisions that require that are yet to be made. Those are in red print. You'll notice as you look at the list, the numbers are out of order. I didn't change the numbers from your original 21 questions. I just separated them these are ones that we pretty much agreed upon. On the other side of the paper, there are 7 that would require some discussion.
Now, in that case, and thank you very much for that, Mr. Collis, in that case, I think what would be a good way of proceeding would be for us to take some time to discuss those items that you had proposed for discussion. And then once we get through those, perhaps we can revisit those other items if we feel that there is need.
Well, and you can certainly put down that list and see, there are some things that as we go forward and that have to be worked out for, back to where I said that number 8 and the number 13. As the actual lease would be printed, we need to, where it says the village will control heat and air in our areas of the building, the lease would probably be something more like the village will control heat and air in their areas of the building. So it's a one-word change because the lease is coming from us to you. So those are just examples of what may occur.
Sure.
We also felt that, it's my understanding you all have copies of the lease between you and the schools.
Not in this,
Oh, I was told. Okay.
Who told you that?
but if you have,
Well, I talked with Mr. Walker earlier. I have 3 copies for you. This is the lease between you and the schools.
thank you.
I didn't print more because I thought they were.
Yeah, that's fine.
We felt that that's a good place to start because your attorney back when that was done had already approved everything that's in there. And we took that and did one of those things where as we modify, we do the different colored letters, we might line out what we disagree with and the changes. It's a place to start. We all know that there's a clause in there for the 90 days, which we don't want. We've already said we don't do anything like that. So we thought that was a basic. We did, I did have my assistant, Amy Hellman, contacted both the Michigan Township Association and the Municipal, Michigan Municipal League, and we asked about boilerplate contracts between communities that share services. And nothing exists with either of those entities, Michigan Municipal or Michigan Township Association. So the Michigan Township Association has a dashboard, if you will, where all 1,200 townships in the state have access. And you can put it's a handy tool. You can put a question out there and say, hey, we're looking at doing this, what are other communities doing? So that we're not left with having to reinvent the wheel. We put the question out to those communities as to who has shared contracts. We also placed phone calls to the communities close to us that we knew were sharing space. Milford Township, Village of Milford, Farmington Hills, City of Farmington Hills, City of South Lyon and South Lyon Public Schools. And those 3, with our phone calls, said that they didn't have contracts, literal contracts. They said that the boards just had agreed to share space, and it was on a percentage basis of who had, whether it was 50-50 or 60-40 or something like that. We did have 2 townships that came back that had leases, and those were, I want to say Spring Lake. One was between Jerome Township and the Village of Sanford. And then the other one was between the Village of Spring Lake and Spring Lake Township. Those are 2 groups that have contracts. The lease between Spring Lake and Spring Lake Township is from 2015. And the lease between Sanford and Jerome Township is signed by both townships, and it has no date.
George, can you move the microphone in front of you, please?
Yeah, we can't hear you. Thank you.
Okay, is that better?
Yes.
Better. Okay. So we did kind of at the 11th hour find 2 that could be looked at and viewed and we can make copies and supply those to you. Those will help.
Thank you.
A lot of townships just chimed in and said, we share space, both boards agreed that it was 50-50 or whatever the split was. So that's kind of a background that takes us to here.
Okay. So we would like to begin with
Okay,
number 3.
yep, so.
The township will be responsible for property maintenance, grass cutting, snow removal, sidewalk clearing, contracting with the DPW, and be negotiated until the township moves in. The DPW will manage the snow removal in the current parking lot.
Okay, so I just want to clarify, because you said let's start with number 3 again, for the audience that may be watching. There was a series of 21 questions. I pulled out the ones that we felt we already agreed on. I did not change the numbers. So as we go through these discussions, these are questions pulled from the list of 21. We're not starting on 3, which means we skipped 1 and 2. They just happen to be on the other list.
Thank you. Yeah.
Don't you think that it would be better if we looked at whether it would be a condo or a lease, and then all those other details would depend on whether it was a condo?
Oh,
Or a
certainly.
lease.
What do other members of the committee think about that? Starting with the discussion of condo versus lease,
So if-
or staff for that matter.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, I think that's probably the most important.
It is
the
Yeah.
most
All the
important.
questions.
If you turn the paper over, 1 and 2 are the condominium, the building in which the village will occupy. And then number 2 is the town, number 2, and it's tied in with number 5, the length of the contract to be perpetual with $1 per year. If condominium is viable, then there would be no lease, there'd be no contract, or there'd be no contract. So some of these questions depend on which one of those we land on. We have talked about condoing. We're currently waiting for a legal opinion. We would have no problem with condoing the property out as long as it said upon surrender of the property by the village. That means if the village somewhere down the road decides to move out, then it would revert back to the township. So that's a legal question. I have called the MTA. They refer us to legal counsel, and that's where that question is.
And you're talking about voluntary opt-out of the village?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the only reason I say it is because there was some discussion at the last council meeting about maybe you don't have a termination clause, but if you have some type of contract, one party or the other can still break it, and the remedy is court. But I mean, if you're talking voluntary opt-out, I mean, that's a different thing.
Oh, that's actually the main point of this, can still force eviction on the village. So where it says surrender, it certainly needs to include the word volunteer, if volunteer is what you're trying to address.
You're reading it from,
From number 1?
But we could, yeah, we wouldn't, I don't, as a condo, you would own it, so we can't force you out.
understand, number 1 is a question that you wrote, we didn't write, so the language is coming from you to us, not from us to you. All we're saying is condominium, the property is owned by the taxpayers. It's owned by the township as a legal entity. If we were to say, okay, we'll call it a condominium, that's your space for purpose of definition. Our only concern is that if you guys decide to leave, you don't get to sell it to somebody, it reverts back to the township.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's
You know,
all
think
that
of the same
says.
with the lease, you would exit the same way if you were leasing. You know, any improvements would remain with the leaseholder, whether, you know, in any business, that's how it usually is.
Sure.
So,
So that was it.
Well, you're talking improvement down the road or
no,
initial?
your own, any of it,
Initial.
your own improvements within your own condo.
Well, because part of the initial offer was this would be your space and we will, lack of a better term, even though it's no interest rate, we will finance any improvements or rehabilitation of this site over X amount of years. The amount of years we didn't pick. And I think typically you think of 25 years. But I mean, I just want to make sure we're talking the same thing because it sounds a little bit like the offer's changed.
Well,
How so?
Well, I thought
it,
right
I mean,
here,
it depends on what you pick and whether we would have to finance it. For you to come in, you have your own money to, you know, do your own building that site loan. so I'd expect that you would do your own building now. If we were to use the building and some of the other conceptual things where we were adding on and doing additional things, we may have to finance that. But we have, you know, the meeting room and those kind of things, that we'd have no way to know if we could actually finance your part. I think we would expect you to improve your own space. We would provide that building.
Yeah, so I think that's good discussion. I mean, this
Yeah.
discussion definitely needs to be had. I guess
Absolutely.
my only point is, that's not what the initial offer was. The initial offer was, you can have this space, and we had talked about specific space, and the township will pay for the renovation of the space, and then the village would pay it back over X amount of years. So the village would be paying it,
Right.
just over what time period would they be paying it? I mean, I think, you know, when we're talking contract, those are just the type of specifics that it's important that everybody's on the same page.
Right.
Just so I understand, you know, and then maybe it's not what you're saying, please correct me if I'm wrong. Are you saying that if we chose to go the condoing route, that the village would be expected to pay for our portion of the rehabilitation of the village, or not rehabilitation, but the work, the remodeling of the building up front, and that offer of financing is off the table?
Once you go to condoing, that space becomes yours, it no longer becomes ours. So it does change the dynamics, and again, we're looking at the legal side, but understand, there's a if you lease, we still own the property. If we condo, it basically puts the property in your hands.
Sure.
So,
That's just semantics, because it really doesn't change anything if the original offer was, this is yours for 99 years.
okay, and again,
So,
you've accused me of changing the offer, we didn't bring the
I'm not
condoing
accused
up.
of anything.
Well, just a few minutes ago, you said.
I feel like this is bordering on back and forth. I'd like to ask the chair to call order, please.
Certainly. Let's have folks share one at a time. And I think for the conversation to remain productive, certain words like accusing, we should probably avoid.
So we should
So
probably
what
avoid,
I'm,
we should probably avoid accusing.
Well, certainly that too.
Okay.
But I just want to be clear, what I'm hearing is, if we do go the condoing route, your offer to finance, the work on the village's portion of the building is off the table. And if that's what you're saying, that's fine, I just want to make sure that that's what, I don't want to misunderstand.
So again, this is something that you brought to us, the topic of condominiums in your questions. We've turned that over to the attorney. Some of the answers to the question you're answering depend on what those rules are, what we are allowed to do and what we're not allowed to do. So that's why we have to pose the question. I said conceptually, we're not opposed to condoing in, saying, okay, fine, it's condos, it's yours, as long as it reverts back to us if and when you decide to leave. I don't know if that's legal, if we can actually do that. We have to ask that question. Once we get into the answer to that question, then it will determine if we're allowed to do anything else. I don't know, once it's condo to you, it becomes you, and we become separate from that aspect. I don't know the answers to that.
Okay.
I'm wondering if it would be fair to ask legal, as part of the negotiations, if we were to surrender property at any point, if we could get a percentage of perhaps sale back, or whatever would be the proper term, depending on which route we went with this. If we had put a large amount of, or any amount of money into the remodeling of the building, if any criteria could be agreed on in that manner.
So typically, when somebody leases a building, whatever build-out you put into the building is your build-out. If your business succeeds, then you utilize it. If it doesn't, that loss becomes yours. This is not a building, this is a building that's ready to go tomorrow. It may not be ready to go the way we want to use it. It may not be ready the way you want to use it, but it's functioning. It has its heating, its cooling. So the renovation is simply a matter of where you're gonna place the walls, how you're gonna do that, what things additional you're gonna add for your specific use. And the next person coming into that space may have to tear it all out and start over and go a different direction.
I
That's
think-
typically,
I see what you're saying, and I appreciate that. I think that's just something maybe worth noting as a board, that any monies that we did have to put into it to meet the specific needs of our staff is something that we would potentially not get back if we did vacate at some point in the future.
Do you foresee any reason why you would vacate?
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not psychic. It was
Oh,
just,
what?
well, just
I just
considering,
don't- Yeah.
just the pros and cons of owning versus not exactly necessarily owning for forever.
I think would it help us to proceed with a little more clarity of those of us on the village side of the table and the township side of the table. I'd like to ask my fellow committee members if they have at least an initial opinion on whether they would lean more towards a condoing type of agreement or a lease type of agreement.
It's always better if it's a short-term thing, renting, leasing is generally a better option versus if you're long-term and you're talking about buying is the better option for you. So I would hope that we are all, this is a long-term plan, so I would lean more towards ownership of this versus leasing.
That's great.
I've almost always figured it's usually better to own than to rent, unless it's something that's going to quickly lose its value. And I don't feel like that's the case here.
And I would certainly agree with that. And I just say that because, when you're talking with your attorney, I think it'll give you a little bit better direction on where we're
well,
looking.
and I think your decision's gonna be predicated on what those legal answers are. And
Do you have any idea on when your attorney might get back with you on some of those answers?
So, you had your meeting last Tuesday. Debbie Biggers reached out to us on Wednesday to set up the meeting on Monday. We set up the meeting on Monday, we set up the meeting today. I have it on the township docket for tomorrow. I don't know, I just put it there so it allows me to talk about it. I don't know what I need to be taking to the board. I may just be reporting where we are. But we're doing everything we can to fast track this. So once the attorney comes back, like I said, I talked to MTA today. There was nothing that, I don't know how often you guys use MML or like Michigan Township Association. When, I know, because I know April, you have access to it. When you call them, they don't give you legal advice. I always start with them because sometimes they go, well, now wait a minute, George, it's right over here. And Catherine Ballhawk really knows the Michigan compliance laws. And sometimes she'll save me a phone call from the attorney, because we all know I have to pay them. So I started with them. There wasn't anything within the parameters that they were aware of, so that sent me to the attorney next. I would imagine we'll have that answer back in the next couple of days. When we do, that's there. I mean, it may give us direction that we can't do it. It may give us direction we can, but we have to do this. I don't know what to kind of say.
Jerry, you said the deadline was October 2nd, but I thought it was 30 days the council gave for the finance committee.
No, they gave a specific date of October the 2nd so that everything could be compiled and put into the next council packet.
I think the 30 days includes the council meeting,
Oh,
which is like the next
The
week.
template.
that seems almost like
The
an
template
impossible
that they put up
task.
on the calendar.
Well, and that had to do largely with, if we did end up selecting the cyclone location, with range hall location, we have a pretty clear timeline that was given to us by our needs of the assessment firm, which we're actually already behind on. And so we wanted to be able to bring this up at the next council meeting, and therefore, you know, to get all the information, you know, in the packet, and get that out to council persons as soon as possible.
I think I'm satisfied with the information that's currently available for the first question. Should we move on if that's okay with everyone?
And then went back over to the discussion page number 3. So that again, this comes from the village. The township will be responsible for property maintenance, grass cutting, snow removal, sidewalk clearing. Contracting with the DPW can be negotiated. Until the township moves in, the DPW will manage the snow removal in the current parking lot. I would hope, because this is taxpayer driven, that once we're in there sharing the property, as the township is making the property available, I would hope that the village could take the responsibility, because they already own the equipment, of doing the maintenance from the standpoint of snow removal and lawn cutting. Otherwise, it ends up a transfer of tax dollars from one hand to the other.
Yeah, no, I think you're right about that. I mean, that's certainly something that seems logical. I think it's important, though, that if we do reach an agreement, that it's included in that agreement, because nobody sitting around this table is gonna be here in 25 years. And so, you know, you have changeover of different councils, different boards.
I didn't say I was opposed to the question, I just
Yeah.
gave you
No,
my opinion.
yeah, no, well, I'm concurring with you for once.
Pardon me?
I'm concurring with you for once.
Careful.
I know, I get a bad reputation.
You're gonna confuse people.
Was there any,
I don't think that that's unreasonable.
yeah,
Okay, move on to number 6.
sure.
Now, number 6 has a word that got inserted. It says remodel or furnish of the building. I don't know that I would expect everybody to furnish their own building. Remodel is one thing, but I noticed the word furnish got stuck in there. Remodel, furnish of the building paid upfront by the township. And then it says repayment will be at $1,000 per month. That's the number I was telling you. We have no idea what that number is, but we have no idea what the cost is going to be. We might be safer to say, as Mr. Walker said, will be paid back in a 25-year period. Then the number becomes whatever the math dictates. Does that make sense to everybody?
Well, and it depends on what they
Well-
want to do and how they want to remodel, and it's something we can't answer, it has to go to the board. So we have to analyze what the meeting room's gonna cost, all of the things that we're doing are gonna cost, and how much we have left over as
Right,
well.
well, and that's number 12, the next question. Some of these questions kind of tie,
Yeah,
connect to each
they
other.
do.
So, but you'll notice back at number 6, we make the notation, it depends on the condo option or the lease is chosen. And again, that has to do with that legal answer. I don't know that once we go from a lease to a condo, that could change what's allowed to happen. And again, I don't know.
But I think here in discussion of what you brought up, I think you're absolutely right with this specific office space. That's probably what needs to be addressed specifically in a contract. And then there needs to be another clause that says for shared spaces, those costs will be paid in
Correct.
X manner. I mean, it could be
Right.
any manner, it could be in front, it could be again added to, you know, whatever the percentage.
Yeah.
Because we know a shared meeting room is
Well-
certainly gonna be 50-50.
Well, right, and I would rather see you do your, finance your own condo space in the township, do the meeting room, and of course, we take your input on what that looks like, and,
Only our perspective and only from experience. I mean, we're looking for partnership and not just suggestion, but we're looking for being part of the decision-making because.
And that's why we,
well,
that's
we
what.
do have our architect already has
No.
really mapped it all out already, so I guess you want to pick
Mr.
colors
Chair.
or?
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
can I have the mic, please? So, George, you and I spoke before and kind of tossed around an idea, and like you've said many times, that nothing's written in stone, we're just tossing around ideas. We talked about maybe a board comprised of village and township liaisons, and maybe also of whoever the other neighbors might be. And so that is something that could potentially navigate, the words equal say. So is that something that, and this is for everyone, is a board of that nature, or a committee, whatever we should call it, something that should be considered in the contract?
So I don't know if it has to be considered in the contract. We've certainly offered that as a talking point from our standpoint. I understand that the village has some issues with their current contract and how that's been handled. And I understand the need to be defensive about that. But we've come with it from a standpoint of open and saying, hey, let's do this. For the longest time, Mr. Walker and I talked about shared services prior to this. It only went south when we brought this up. So I understand the issues that were had. I mean, there's a question in here that says the township or the village will get to pick their own temperature in the room kind of a thing. Obviously, if it's you building in your space, you're going to do a change. I mean, just give you an example of the way the township hall works currently. We have separate air conditioning units between the front of the building and the back. The ladies up front run theirs, it's operated in the back. Part of the reason for that is the front of the building in the morning gets the sun. The back of the building gets the afternoon sun. And the offices get hot and cold at different times, so the units that were put in there allow for separate control.
You said other neighbors. What do you mean?
Well, George had spoken before about soliciting other local entities to join in space sharing.
Okay, those local entities were the village, which comprises
All
of
of
the
them were
police.
village entities?
No. Hang on. It was the village. That includes possible DPW, possible police. The other entity was the township library, because the property's connected there. The library has talked about wanting to expand. I was gonna make a presentation to you, and unfortunately, typically, the NACFA board meeting and the township board meeting are in the same week. So when I made the meeting with you, that was the week before the board meeting. What I didn't realize was the calendar took my NACFA meeting and kicked it a week early, because it was like the last day.
Yeah, I presented the best I could on your behalf
Right.
to the library. but-
So when you say multiple entities, there was just the village and the township library. It sounded like more because the village has DPW and police, but it's all under the same umbrella.
So,
The only government entity that we didn't offer to was Parks, because they already have their own place out in Sorensen.
I don't think that asking for a guaranteed equal say to be addressed in the contract is asking for too much. And if it were to be decided that the best way to go about that, if there were the consensus of the parties involved, would be that board, I'd imagine that maybe a representative from whichever people were sharing spaces, even if they're, and, you know, as far as what percentages that would be, if the village itself had more entities, but their village, you know, maybe one police and one fire, and these are just numbers I'm making up, and 2 village council and 3 township members and 1 library, I don't know. I don't know what the figure would be, but it seems as though equal say should be addressed in the contract, in my opinion, in whatever route that might be.
That's fine.
I think that there is language in the school contract that, that was the way that you guys worked that, right? There was a committee of you and the superintendent, Jerry, that you made those decisions, is that, I mean, it could be that way similar.
Yeah, which was fine. I want to be careful here because we have a good working relationship with current HAS administration, but we had a different working relationship with prior administration when it came to the building. And so some of the understandings that we had, which weren't necessarily on paper before, were fine. Where today, they're not on paper and there's a different viewpoint. And so that's why I think, you know, I mean, everybody's discussion about specificity in the contract, even about things that seem minute. I think they're important,
Right.
because it avoids
If you're-
future issues.
Yeah, I agree.
So number 12 was put on the discussion side because we came into it thinking we were gonna be building the boardroom, rather than the meeting room. But we certainly put it on this side because we were open for the discussion and had to, so that's why that's there. Did you wanna move on to number 14?
Well, can I ask, so you're okay with a split 50-50 with us and you determining what that would look like,
Mhm.
even if you guys spent the money? to
Yeah,
do
because
that?
we were already anticipating, the way we came at the plans that we were working on for the township building, that originally we thought was gonna go to the farmstead, was the architect talked to all of the employees in the township. We wanted everybody's input, because we want these rooms to service us as best as they can. The last thing anybody wants to do is put money into something, create it, and then stand there later and go, boy, we should have done this if we'd only done that. It typically happens, but you always want to try to do as much as you can to avoid that, so all of the input necessary is there. We did that when we came up with the sound system that's in the current boardroom. That was a partnership between the village that came from the movement to start putting meetings on tape so people could watch them. Part of COVID escalated that going forward. Part of the reason we partnered with the village was the township was looking at putting in a sound system and recording system in the township office upstairs. Because of the design of the upstairs with the open ceiling, it was so expensive because the sound is difficult to control in a room like that. And our problem was our meetings on Wednesday night, so for the summer, we're in competition with the car show and the DJ, which is right down at the bottom base of the building. So for us, it was an expense, and that was part of why we looked at partnering with the village and moving over this building for those township board meetings. And it also made sense for the community that all of the meetings were at one place, with the exception of the DDA, which was stuck with a boundaries law. They had to stay within the district.
Correct, they wanted to stay within their own district, yes.
But that's why all the rest of us moved in, and we shared the expense with them, and we're still doing that.
And I'd imagine if there's, thank you, Mr. Delaney. I'd imagine if there's a space that we had similar needs on, it's going to be in meeting rooms. So I think that'd be a great opportunity to kind of establish some trust and common ground.
Yep.
Actually, I think as the building sets right now, if you were to look at immediately what needs to be addressed, there probably are two areas. One is the meeting room along with the conference room in that same space, that same bay area where there's the first one and the second one. And then the second would be a records or a storage area, which, I mean, just simply if it were split down the middle, probably meets both of our immediate needs. But, so you have those two spaces.
And interestingly enough, the second set of bays, the taller ceiling one, it's kind of an interesting, the ceilings in the last two bays are taller, which allows you to have like floor 1 and floor 2 for some storage of records. That happens to be the room that has the larger floor space. So you have to decide how you want to use the space, because if you put the meeting room back, then you end up with a bigger room from a standpoint of the meeting room. I think the difference is, Brian Clausen's here, the difference between the first two bays and the last two, isn't it close to 800 square feet?
I think so, based on, yeah, from the measurements.
I think so. yeah.
But one of the things you need to keep in mind too is you have radiant heat in those bays, so if you're gonna use that for storage, you have to change, there has to
Yeah.
be, change
Yeah.
heating source.
Well, and we had talked about that because of future use of the building. It would just be disconnected, left up there, and the ceiling drop below. Those two areas would require heat. The front half of the building is all new mechanical in 2017, and it's powered by 2 furnaces and air conditioning unit and so forth.
I know we talked about, shared rooms, like the meeting room, record storage area, but what about like break room areas? Would you guys want that separate, or are we thinking together? one big break room.
So in our preliminary design, because certainly you couldn't have village office employees traversing the entire length of the building to go take a break. So, I mean, part of our, as we discussed office space and as my staff discussed what could happen, because we actually went down there a couple of times and walked it, envisioned what the area would look like. We had determined a proper area for a break room, and there's already private restrooms there for the staff, as far as a little kitchen area. So, I mean, there is appropriate area within that original, what we talk about as office space area. But I think you're going to need bathrooms, and like I said, a conference room, wherever the meeting room is going to be, whichever bay that it would be in. So.
These are, so I don't know if you had some of the conceptuals we had done. I think that would help, kind of like.
Karen, can you send, if you have one more, can you send one more, so we'll have it for
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, because I think if, on the first page, I mean, you could have it, it shows the one bay with all storage, but that could be the village, and then you have the meeting room, and then the kitchenette, the bathrooms and stuff, that could be shared, and then the township. Yeah, that one, right.
And I
I
guess
mean,
what
this was
I'm
like,
asking
this
to
was like
maybe.
for us, but you could actually use that far bay. We would have to come up with storage, shared storage space somewhere.
No, I guess maybe I didn't phrase it properly. As we're talking about the meeting room and all of us coming together on how that's going to be designed, would that public office kitchenette space also be under the same thing where we would have the 50-50%?
I would think so, I don't know.
I don't know.
Okay.
Oh, and you know what?
How it could be though, actually, because it's contained within the office space of the village.
No, it would be the middle, if you look, well, there's several options here, but just the one, if you're picking the first
one.
page, it's in the middle with the meeting room, the kitchenette would be there, and a conference room, so that's the shared space. And then the two offices are completely on the opposite ends of the building. Mhm. Oh, yeah.
Looks like one underneath it.
Mhm.
I thought we were talking about how the building sets right now,
Mhm.
and where we had already discussed village office space would be, which is
Whereas-
in the existing Dawson Tire office space area,
And then where,
with the middle bay being the meeting room, conference room, and then the third bay, the storage.
and then where does the township go?
Well, so what's interesting is, again, these are concept drawings.
Sure.
If you look at the first one, it's got that public office kitchenette. If you go to the second drawing where it shows township on one end, village on the other, put the drawing together, left no kitchen at all that I can see. Other than a little coffee area out in front of the board of trustees.
Well, I think because.
Are we not on the staff lounges?
Yeah.
Where?
In the corners.
Pink and
Oh,
orange.
I see it back over here.
Both first
Okay,
page and
yep,
second
I
page
got it.
include two
I just
staff
noticed
lounges
that
on the
where it
ends.
was in the first one, it's no longer there.
No, because I think the drawing that you're looking at, or the concept, shows a brand new township addition.
The second one.
Not, yeah, the second page.
Yep.
Not using existing space, but adding additional space. So that's why it doesn't show, because it's been moved. And the pink area then would be the proposed village area.
And Ms. Fire, I'm not certain that any of this answered your question. I thought that you were asking about equal say in shared spaces.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
That would be correct.
So your question specifically was?
Specifically, we would have 50% input in what this public office kitchenette space for the existing
Whatever
building.
shared space we have. Because as you look at these drawings, it changes from drawing to drawing.
Right.
So whatever, in fact, if you notice, not the first page, but the second page shows the township in an L shape with the village.
Right.
Then there's one where it shows it angled off. There's a reason for that, and I'm surprised they didn't pull this out of here, but when we were talking, if you look at this first design here on the map, or on an aerial view of the property, when you drive in with the retention pond over here, it really cuts the back of the property off. So we said to them from concept 1 to concept 2, what if we took it and slid it back so that it was in line with the existing building, and then it would, the space in between to get to the rest of the property is wider. So again, that's why these are concepts. What do we see? You put a whole group of, another group of people down and they say, well, what about this? And you move forward. But you'll see that in those drawings. That ideas change as you look at it. You'll see it again in this drawing. And then if you go back to the last one, where they make the change and they move the office to the back, you can see how it changes the dynamics of the parking lot. So while this is all one set of drawings, it's actually two. They came to us with one set, we made a couple of alterations, and then they added the
Different
alterations.
concepts, yeah.
So to answer your question, Amber, any shared space would be shared.
And
Short answer, yes.
We finally got
I
there.
believe that, I think that with these questions, we've effectually answered questions 14 and 16 as well.
Well, and you'll see where we numbered this, that 16 goes with 6 and 14.
Yeah.
Now 15, that, you guys have questions on?
I don't know what that means.
It's
Signing
just a
question.
question.
Yeah.
I didn't put them there, okay, this comes from you. All
Yeah.
I'm saying is with 16, we would sit down and say, what are we gonna do for a sign, what do we want for a sign? There's currently a metal frame sign that was not lighted, that was not electrified, it was just a sign. If you go by the property, you'll notice we had a temporary sign put up that we created for that, just so it lets people know it's the future home of the township. There was another smaller sign off to the side that said free tires, and we covered that up, and it says here to serve you. And it was just, the intent was to give it some identification for people that were saying, where's this again, where's it again? Obviously, I don't know when the village leaves this building, will you bring your signs with you?
They're probably cost more to move them.
Well, the other thing is technology-wise, they're
And
probably
technology
old.
has changed. Yeah, and so really the only point of having this as a talking point is, again, that's another one of those details where, you know, it just needs to be specified, very similar probably, as Ms. Kyer brought to light on the shared spaces, that in essence is a shared space. And so I just think there needs to be equal input as far as what we want and how it's going to be paid for. I tell you, in that area, without variance, pole signs are not allowed. And so some type of monument sign
Which is what's going on.
would, yeah, which there would be appropriate. But I mean, certainly you can have a much more functional monument sign than just a static sign.
And you share your sign today with the schools?
We do. So the thing is though, with that, only one party, I mean, unless technology has advanced past the point of where it was, only at the time when we installed that, only one party has administrative rights to change messages. So there's no competing. So we had an agreement with the school that the village will make changes and they'll provide notice within X. Just again, those details, so there's no conflict down the road. I think, you know, those are the type of things, you know, that we need to talk about.
Absolutely, because yeah, those signs, I mean, I know the ones coming into town and going out of town, those aren't lighted and those are still thousands of dollars.
Oh, it's gonna be, there's gonna be a first sign there, you're gonna be 15 to 20,000.
So
I think one of the best lighted signs I've seen in the village is the one that the Methodist Church has. They have graphics on it, they put different things out there, different things. The one at the middle school is good, so obviously we would have to sit down and say, here's what we envision putting up there, and here's the cost. Go from there.
I mean, a monument sign is probably a little cheaper than a pole sign, but, I mean, you're
That's what the
15.
Methodist Church has.
Yeah, you're 15 plus or minus.
I think along the same lines as the sign, we need to have a conversation, and this wouldn't need to be right away, and maybe it's ridiculous, actually, I don't know. I was just thinking about joint website sharing. I know traditionally places that share spaces don't, but because we'd be a municipality complex, it might be something worth a conversation. Keep the websites split separately, join them, link them to one another. I don't know, I just think it's a topic.
No, and that certainly makes sense, especially if any time you get shared services like that, and you can cut the cost down.
Yeah, I mean, probably separate, than a building agreement, but, I mean, it's certainly something that's worthwhile to talk about.
Are there any further questions or comments on anything through number 16?
3 to 16, on that back page, no. That's, where is that something?
Yeah.
If we drop down to 21, I put it over here just so we can discuss it. I think once we determine whose space is whose, what you do with your parking spaces is your call.
How many were available in the different, it looks like it's 56 spaces for the public area, I can see that.
So it's,
Oh, I guess I can kind of.
I think there's 28 spaces that currently exist. That does not count the concrete apron in front of the cave doors. Obviously, if the building gets changed, that becomes parking. There's also an area beyond that, Dawson Tire had brought in the 23 AA and laid the foundation so they could drive their heavy equipment on. Next year, we're already having the engineering done on extending the de-acceleration lane that's in front of Subway to come all the way to our driveway. When that happens, we will probably change the slope of the entrance, because if you come off Grange Hall now, it's kind of a down and hid. We'll probably smooth it out, and at that point, we'll probably recap the parking lot and extend it to the fenced area, which will extend that parking, if you look at the area view, to the east of that.
And there's also some additional parking to the rear of the building.
Well, there's already parking in front of the building
Yeah.
and on the west side. I think there's 4 spaces back there.
Yeah, so, I mean,
That would probably be.
some type of employee.
parking. Closest one to the door for the village manager, that kind of thing.
The guy who needs the most exercise.
I know generally in shared spaces, there is some kind of fire suppression in between the buildings. Who would be responsible for that?
Well, and that will have to be looked at once the permits are applied for and the building.
Contractor.
The contractor deals with the village. The village didn't make them put in suppression. I don't know if it was a square footage issue, probably.
That was a combination of square footage and employees, because there's a meeting room, more than likely under current code. There will be some type of suppression at least in that part of the building, and whether it's required or not in the records.
There's
portion of the
also
building will be
Right.
appropriate.
There's also some.
It's over 6,000 square feet, you have to, but then there are some things that you can do in lieu of sprinklers, because those are extremely expensive.
Yeah. I know there's also, I thought, I can't even find it fast. It'll come back to me.
Okay. We'll come back to that.
Oh, I know what it was I was gonna say. There, at the time that Dawson Tire put the addition to the front, the handicap spaces are out in front of the building. And when you come up the ramp on the sidewalk, it dumps you out into a step up to the building. And that step and that are new, because it's part of a new addition. And when I first saw it, I couldn't understand how that was allowed. Well, the way it got allowed was, and it doesn't make sense. If you got out of your handicap car and you were in a wheelchair and you came up with a ramp on the sidewalk, you'd be stuck. If you get out of your car and go around the parking lot, you can come in on level ground through the bay doors. And I'm assuming that must have been the argument at the time.
I'm sure it was.
So we already have said, we're gonna put, where that step goes into the building needs a ramp and not a rail. Because it's designed with the 4 handicaps to come up that ramp. The problem is it's drops you in the middle of nowhere. My guess is the tire store never had anybody, because if commercial tires never had anybody in a wheelchair that could have to, I don't know. Because there are no push plates.
Yeah, that all has to be brought up to code. Because you also have to have a landing area in front of that door, which is larger than what's there now.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying, how that, in 2017, apparently that wasn't an issue.
Well, they probably use an alternate entrance route.
Well, that's what, it's the only thing that makes sense, because that's what you have to do to get into the building.
Did we get an answer for 21? The village will have a right to designate parking spots.
That's what I just said. Wherever your space is, you can designate what you want.
Are there any other questions or comments on
Good on that.
discuss side of that page? Turn to the other side of that page. I just want to be clear, Mr. Cullis, the representatives of the township, you're saying agree,
Yeah, we don't see any issues with it.
I know you're pursuing,
Right up top of the page. it
legal
says-
counsel on the,
Township.
yeah,
Yeah.
condominium, question.
I mean, we can rip through them real fast. The village,
Sure.
the village will have their own meter, gas, electric, water, pay their own utilities. Yep, we agree. The village will control the heat and air in their areas. Now, it says in our areas, I changed there because again, this came from you to us. If we're the lessor, it would be reverse language. Number 9, the village and township will have separate addresses similar to the village and our area schools. And we don't have an issue there. The village would be able to install a mailbox and drop box on the property, of course. The village would have control over access to their space, of course. Again, changing there. Oh, it actually says the village will have control over the access to our building. I changed that. I'm sorry. Okay.
Just clear my throat.
Okay. The village will have control over the access to their space in the building. It just reverses it.
To clarify on that, will there be, much like there is in KRC, maybe locking doors between the shared spaces from one to another?
Yeah, yeah, we all have to have security. There would be locking areas like from the village offices and the township offices from the public space. If you get a chance and you go to Orion Township, they have a new building there. They have, the township offices are on one wing, if you will. The supervisor's office is in kind of the center of the lobby. It's a separate entrance from the township. And then the boardroom is to the left. And then they have a community room over on the other end. And they have keypads. And everything locks or unlocks or whatever with the keypad. If a certain element isn't being used at that time, it's locked. 17, the village will not share in the cost of any further buildings on the property without a shared specific agreement for that facility. The village will have the right to decline and share in any future buildings. That makes sense too.
No, actually, I'd like a little clarity on that, so if I can have the mic, please. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you own, well, the township owns the land, so, will the village have any say in the selection of additional buildings, neighbors to occupy, or the proximity to the building that we share space in?
I mean, I suppose. again, those people that we talked to were just the library. I've talked to you and Greg, you know, I haven't presented to the board, but we've talked to, the only other elements we were talking about our village, which is DPW police, and we laid out possibilities where they would go. I don't know if you remember, but at the time we did that, somebody talked about the DPW and you wouldn't want it where everybody looks at it going by the road. Well, this property is completely behind the Subway shopping center and goes back along that line. So the one concept drawing shows the DPW back on that side. And the nice part about it is as you pull in from the road, the parking lot goes both ways around the building. So you have the opportunity for DPW to have their own in and out to the back side over there. And then we show the building in the back. They were concept.
Well, and it might not be necessary to everyone else that we have a particular equal say in who the neighbors are or the proximity of their building to the building we share, but maybe just a clause that, you know, guarantees that it's within the spirit of municipality. You know, I struggle with that word.
Well, like I said, the only two partners here are going to be the village and the township. The only other possible partner would be the township library, which is already somewhat connected to the township, so.
Would we cover 13? Seems like we did.
The village would be responsible for repairs in their own building space, that makes sense.
Questions or comments?
Maybe.
Yeah.
I'm not certain, so that's something that I would want input on about the fairness of, so the building space, I would agree, is in the space that we're using. Now, what about the building itself, such as the foundation, the roof, the windows? Maybe not the windows. We could ultimately still and maybe that would all be okay, that falls to the village as well per an inspection or something too. I think that that's just a talking point that needs to be addressed.
I mean, the last inspection was conducted by the village in 2017.
I would imagine, just like condos, if you have two condos together, they repair the roof and then they split the cost depending on the percentage of the amount of space.
The interesting thing about that
But
is
it's-
there isn't one roof across the
Where was
building.
it? That was new in 17, right?
Well, each section has its own roof. If you look at them, they're different heights.
Right.
The back wing is taller than the middle one, the front one's taller. They're all different roofs.
I think they were all redone at the same
Yeah.
time, so they're
Yeah,
not.
they're all new as
by any means.
2017.
Yeah.
But they are pretty easy to determine what roof goes to what.
Mhm.
So those different particulars could even be addressed individually. Maybe in the case of the roofs, it's okay, you pay for your own, but in the case of the foundation, it's shared because of all of the joint weight or whatever's appropriate.
If you want to move on to 17. Oh, we already talked about.
18.
Yeah, 18. The village building will not be charged or altered without a written agreement with both municipalities. That can be put in there, we can have an issue with that. 19, any work outside that would disrupt normal village operations, for example, parking lot repaving would be noticed. We didn't have an issue with that. And then the village will have control over the hours of operation of the village building. That makes sense too. You know, just so you know, most people don't know this, but Jerry and I communicate anytime we've had storms, who's gonna be open, who's not. We've already been doing that.
Mhm. Oh, yeah, no, we have a much better relationship than the consensus of some people. So, I mean, the township and the village, I mean, I would say probably have the best relationship that the two municipalities have enjoyed in over 30 years. you know.
That's not what I heard on Facebook.
I know, that's why I say it, you know. so-
Everything you read is true.
Yeah, so, you know,
You have
so
to be
the-
careful, that open discussion group, they allow anything.
Yeah, so that's the thing about difference of opinion in today's society. Right away, if you have a difference of opinion, people think you're mortal enemies, when in fact, it can just simply be difference of opinion. I mean, George and I will leave this meeting today. Tomorrow, we'll probably be working on something jointly. We walked out of his office yesterday and met with 2 officials from Canadian National Railroad and working on future village township promotional projects with CN. So, you know, I mean, it's just kind of the nature of the beast. It's really not confrontational. It's just, you know what, we both have individual responsibilities to safeguard. That's all.
So in the opinion of staff or the committee or our representatives from the township, what do we think are appropriate next steps?
Well, from listening to Mr. Cullis's rationale for number 1, I think he's right on key there, Q. I mean, so he's waiting on legal opinion. To me, as one member of the village's negotiating team, to me, number 1 is the most important of anything on any of these papers, because not only does that protect the village in a form of ownership, but it answers probably 50% of the other questions that we ask. And so I think really if Mr. Cullis can, of course, it's all generated by, we'll keep paying and keep making decisions. But if we get decisions and guidance from legal counsel, you know, that's really what we need next, I think. And then from there, then we can sit down and say, yeah, we can do it or we can't.
Well, but once we get that decision, it then tells you whether you go that direction or whether you go the perpetual lease for $1 per year. That will say, hey, it's available, or we found out we can't do that because of a series of answers.
So once we have those answers from your legal counsel, do you think that the township would be able to put together based on what we discussed here, a sample contract
What we
for
would
us
do at that
to
point would be
consider at a
we
future
would look
meeting?
at incorporating what we've discussed here
Yeah.
into that school lease.
Okay.
And we would create a document that may show red line, you know, you draw a black line through the stuff you're gonna, I'm sorry, you draw a black line through the stuff you're gonna delete, you type in red the things you're gonna add, and that begins to be, I mean, that becomes the beginning of our lease.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I think that makes perfect sense. Do you have any sense from timing from your attorney? Did he give you an idea? I'll get back with you in a week, a day.
Mr. Pellis said likely a couple of days.
Okay, I mean, are you comfortable in setting a new meeting date today, or do you want to wait till you get that answer and then we'll just schedule one?
I mean, if everybody's open, let's get, I hate to set a date and tell the public and then say, oh, we didn't get the answer yet. It is predicated on the answer, so I'd rather have the answer.
Sure, I'm just saying, you know,
No,
time frame.
have it on silent,
I mean,
that was on my alarm.
That October 2nd date will be here before you know it.
No, well, and that's why I said we've done everything to both accommodate and accelerate the meetings. And the fact that on Monday, we're here today, it's already on my docket, so we'll share this information with the board, and then we'll move right along. And as I said before, I'm not opposed to calling a special meeting, as we all know by the law. You have to have 18 hours to post that. We can do it, you can do it. The public understands what we're doing here, and moving forward.
Okay. I'm satisfied for tonight.
Is the committee satisfied with that plan?
I'm a little concerned about an 18-hour special meeting notice, because as a single mother to littles that works full-time,
Okay,
it
so
might be
the-
difficult for me.
No, so the way we do that, we don't set the meeting until we check with everybody that they're clear.
Thank you for that. Okay, then yes, I am comfortable
We don't
with that.
just throw it out there, we call everybody, everybody, this works for everybody, yeah, good. And then we, no, so it doesn't do any good to have a meeting if you can't meet.
Yeah, I'd really like to be there, so I appreciate that.
Well, we all have schedules too.
Yeah,
You know, if you want a special meeting tomorrow night, you can't do it, you have township board. You know, so I mean, that's why I said you have to look at the calendar, the schedule, check with everybody. That's how we made this meeting. And if you're
Exactly.
right, we said, we're good, you're good. As soon as we know it, we put it out there.
Any thoughts?
The only thing I'd add is, if you haven't already seen it, we are having an open house in that building on Thursday. It was our plan to do that. Some of this direction has kind of gone back and forth. The committee had made one decision. I had met with Jerry a day or two after that, talked about the moving of the Dickens stuff, how that was gonna happen. Then your Tuesday night meeting put us here. But we had talked about opening the building up so the public could see it, getting input on it. At the same time, we're working on some things. We're stalled because we can't really make a decision to go forward until we know whether we're partnering or, you know, flying solo. So those things are out there. But Thursday from 1 to 3 and then from 5 to 8, we will be doing the building open and anyone wants to stop and walk around and look at the building. Is certainly able to do that. I know Mr. Delaney's been there, but I don't think the other two have.
I've driven around the outside, I haven't been inside yet. Boston Tire was like where I made my first sale, so yeah.
Oh, okay.
Well, if there is nothing else, meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.
Meeting adjourned at 7:18. Did you guys, these,
Yes.
these two leases, this one lease, it's interesting, there's no data. It's a pretty simple lease. The one from Sanford is a little more official looking. These are those ones.
Yeah.
I don't have copies, so we'll have to get.
Are you able to-
Okay, then yeah, yeah.